Ja, välkommen till en ny kväll, eller natt kan man kanske säga. Där vi ska kolla in en ny uppskjutning här av SpaceX Starship. Eh, Det är ungefär 21 minuter kvar till att vi ska lyfta. Och de håller just nu på att tankar Starship. De kommer ganska långt ser det ut som. Eh, Ja, jag hoppas det går bättre den här gången i alla fall. Det har ju gått ganska så dåligt de 2 senaste gångerna så att hoppas på en bättre lycka den här gången. Vi har ju lite annorlunda förutsättningar den här gången. De flyger ju som sagt en använd booster den här gången. Första gången de gör det. Så vi får se hur det är, om den presterar som de ska. Vi har även en liten ändring i hot staging-ringen som sitter mellan Starship och boostern. Den har fått en sektion blockerad och kommer hjälpa till med att se till att typ putta iväg boostern åt ett riktat håll så att den är lite mer, ja, den ska gå åt det hållet som de tänker sig att den ska gå åt för att spara bränsle. Vilket i sin tur kommer leda till att de kan få upp lite mer payload till omloppsbanan då så att säga. Starship har ju fått lite förbättringar sen sist. Det här förra gången så exploderade det nu och då hade de ju gjort förbättringar från flygning 7 men de fick ett annat fel då. Den sista uppskjutningen där som de nu ska ha åtgärdat också. Det var en Raptor-motor som exploderade där på grund av ett fel i den. Och de har väl lyckats isolera felet tror jag. Och så har de försökt att lösa det. Så vi hoppas på bättre resultat. Sen har de även fixat till boostern lite. De har vi hade ju 2 motorer där som inte startade sist när de skulle köra boost backburnen där. Och där har de också isolerat felet på och åtgärdat. Så vi ska se här hur det går idag. Vi har tidsschemat här. Tidsschemat, vi behöver inte gå ut om tidsschemat riktigt, men kan gå igenom flygprofilen här lite grann. Då har de att vi lyfter här och går upp. De kommer göra en hot staging och sen har vi en boost backburn för boostern. Kommer sedan landa i havet då, så det är planerat idag. De kommer utföra lite tester och därav att den landar i havet. De kommer att köra en högre attackvinkel på boostern som gör att de ska försöka få ner hastigheten på den och där också för att spara bränsle då. Och sen så när de gör de här testerna då, så är det inte helt enkelt, det är inte säkert att landa på tornet, bli fångad av det längre. Så att de gör en massa tester. De ska även stänga av 1 eller 2 motorer utav de här 3 som sitter i mitten på boostern för att se hur den näst yttre ringen av motorer kan hjälpa till vid landning ifall det skulle vara så att någon av de här 3 motorerna går sönder eller liknande, bara för att få upp den här pålitligheten av boostern. Helt enkelt. Så att därför så landar de i vattnet och de kommer att simulera en landning i tornet då. Så att den kommer stänga av motorerna en bit ovanför vattenytan. Och ja, den är rätt tung då. Så det kommer bara säga splash och så kommer den säkert explodera. Så det är inget konstigt. Efter hot staging-ringen där, eller efter hot stagingen där så kommer man fortsätta köra Starship. Och det är ju här ungefär som det brukar gå fel. Ungefär 8 minuter in. Ungefär. Så har det här skeppet exploderat då. Men lyckas man med hela den här lyckas skeppet klara sig hela vägen, så kommer den då hamna i någonting som kallas för coast phase. Alltså den coastar, alltså den bara följer med omloppsbanan kan man säga. Och sen så har vi då lite här någonstans så ska de testa lite olika saker, som till exempel att skicka ut ett par Starlink-satelliter, dummies då. Och sen så ska de även tända upp en motor. Så att får se här. Jag har play, load, deploy demo, och sen så har vi Raptor in Space Light demo. Och sen har vi landing flip och så landing burn. Så den här är ju också lite intressant, för de har ju försökt att göra det här ett par gånger nu och de har inte lyckats som sagt. Men de har alltså lite olika testartiklar på skeppet som olika tiles då, för att kunna, ja, de ska se vad som händer ifall det inte sitter en tiles där. De ska se vad som händer med en tile. Alltså tilen då tänkte referera till, eller hänvisa till värmeskölden som sitter på Starship då. Den som är den svarta sidan på skeppet. Och ja, vi kan dra bort den där så, och så tar vi och tar bort den här så, och så tar vi fram SpaceX istället där. Så då ska de testa helt enkelt att se hur de här beter sig. De olika sköldplatesen då. Vi kallar dem för tiles. Ja. De olika tilesen ska testas då, så se om de kan göra värmeskölden bättre, eller ja, hur de kan göra för att förbättra den och göra den mer pålitlig. Ja, vi drar på ljudet här på streamen så får vi se vad de säger.
That's roughly what we did on flight 5. It's the most direct way to get into that orientation for the boost back burn. What you don't want to do is when you flip all the way down like that, we did that on flight 7, it takes you in a big loop, uses the most amount of prop, not efficient. We're at the point where we want to start kind of tuning it in and getting some extra performance out of the booster.
Yeah, exactly. That's called optimization.
That's right.
To accomplish this, we made some changes to the hot stage adapter, welding reinforced panels over the vents in the direction that we want the booster to go. So when the ship engines ignite, the thrust will push against the blocked vents, which means that the nudge will be in the direction that we planned for. And then when we go to the next generation of ship and booster, we plan to control the flip direction by fine-tuning the engine startup sequence on the ship.
Yeah, that's not the only flight experiment that we have planned for the booster today. We're not attempting a catch, so we're going to try and gather additional data that's going to improve performance on future boosters. We're also going to try and see how resilient we are to things like losing an engine during the landing burn. By sending the booster out to sea, we're able to do these higher risk tests without risking the launch pad. As you might have heard earlier, we're going to be doing what's called a higher angle of attack. Basically, instead of coming straight down, we're going to tilt up a little bit. That gets you more drag on the booster. You're able to use just aerodynamic forces to slow you down. The slower you're going at the start of that landing burn, the less propellant you need, because really you're just focused on slowing down as much as humanly possible when you fire that up. So by already going a little bit slower, we'll get some benefits to our performance and our reliability on those burns.
Yeah, exactly. And there's definite uncertainty in how well the booster's grid fins and structure will be able to control its flight when we get into higher angles. So don't be surprised if it isn't a smooth descent for the booster down to its splashdown point today. The most important objective of this portion of the test will be getting actual flight data to help anchor our models. Now, we're hoping to fly the next generation of super heavy boosters at even higher angles of attack. So this test today will give us a better idea of what is feasible. Now, on top of all of this, we're going to see how resilient Super Heavy is to engine failures at the most critical times.
Yeah, we're going to intentionally disable one of those 3 center engines and instead use an engine from the middle ring that's kind of right behind it. Those center engines are what we nominally use at the very last part of a landing burn. You're just kind of fine-tuning the booster's path into those waiting chopstick arms. This is going to act as a real-world simulation of a pretty scary situation where engines are not starting at probably the worst possible time, but we're going to do this without risking the pad. And then at the very end of the landing burn, we're going to cut one more engine off and go down to only those two center engines. The burn is going to end while Super Heavy is still several hundred feet above the Gulf, so we expect it to make a pretty hard splashdown today. So, in all, pretty eventful day for the booster.
And as many of you may know, water landings are actually uncommon for SpaceX. While other launch providers expend all of their boosters after flight, we land and reuse most of ours. All of these tests are going to help us improve future generations of Super Heavy until we reach its
Ja,
fundamental
där har ni
design,
då
a fully and rapidly reusable
de pratar lite grann om där med hur de kommer landa och sådär. Så att, och det här med att de kommer och
My colleagues here in Hawthorne definitely agree with you. We can't wait to see the
avaktivera
Super Heavy perform
ett par
its second
motorer
flight
där
and
för
see
att landa.
all of the work
Se
from
så
our
att
thousands of engineers and technicians
hur den
in
klarar sig om
action
de skulle
today.
gå sönder. Och
Now,
sen så
while
då
this
pratar de
reuse
även
milestone
om
is
hot
incredibly
stage-ringen
important
där.
for
Att de
Starship's
har blockerat en viss
development,
sida
Super
för
Heavy
att den
boosters
ska
are not the only vehicles that we
trycka sig
reuse
iväg
here at
åt
SpaceX.
ett
We're
visst
big
håll
on
då.
reuse, and our Dragon
Sen har vi ju
fleet is another
även,
example
ja,
of
de
that
sa ju också att de
reuse.
kommer i framtiden kommer de
And we actually
försöka
control
att
those Dragon missions from right here in Hawthorne in the
använda
mission control room that we talked about a little bit
motorerna
earlier.
på Starship
For
för att
Dragon
trycka
and
iväg
our
den här
human
då.
spaceflight
Men det
program,
kommer i
this month also
ett
marks
senare
a
skede,
big
helt
milestone
enkelt.
for SpaceX, our 5-year anniversary of human spaceflight. Now, NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley got us started back on Demo 2, which was notable for being the first time since the retirement of the shuttle program in 2011 that people launched to orbit from U.S. soil. Now, in those 5 years, we have launched 17 human spaceflight missions, 11 for NASA, and 6 commercial missions, including Polaris Dawn, with our first commercial spacewalk in history, and From 2 earlier this year, which became the first human spaceflight mission ever to explore Earth's polar regions. We've flown a total of 66 crew in those 5 years, and we are expecting that number to grow significantly in the coming years. Now, most recently on our From 2 mission, the crew offered unique glimpses into the orbital spaceflight experience. And this was honestly just so cool to see. Thank you to our Starlink teams for making everything with the From 2 crew shared possible. This honestly made me feel like I was right there with them in Dragon. They were living, they were working, they were relaxing, they were doing their experiments while also having fun. Basically, just being people and inviting us along for the ride. And that was really meaningful. Being invited up there really showed how these are just the early days on the road to making life multiplanetary. And the vehicle that's going to make all of that happen is Starship. And Dan and Jesse, I don't know about you, but that is definitely a future I have wanted since I was a little kid, and I cannot wait to see us make it a reality.
Yeah, right there with you, Chris. It's the fact that we're getting close to that being reality, that the vehicle that's going to go is sitting on the pad right there. Like, that's endlessly exciting. All of that's going to include sending humans, all of the infrastructure for a permanent presence on Mars. And we're looking ahead to sending the very first Starships to Mars as early as next year.
Yeah, this will help prove that we can actually get to Mars with a focus on learning as much as possible while demonstrating what will be needed for Mars transit and landing. But before we can make life multiplanetary, we have to build the starships that will make this all possible.
That's right. And that's happening right here, Starbase, Texas, the gateway to Mars. This is where we're soon going to be launching up to 25 Starship launches per year from here at Starbase. And the place is changing every single day. We've grown quite a bit just in the last couple of years. There's a couple hundred employees, their families living amongst actual rockets. We're in the process of expanding production and integration. We've got a target of 1,000 Starships a year we're going to try to hit. And recently, we did become a city of our own. We're the first city in Cameron County in 30 years. And that's just going to help us scale more quickly, try to build out the best community possible for all the people that are building the future of humanity's place in space. Starbase, pretty easily one of the most inspiring, exciting, unique places to live and work on the planet. As usual, shameless plug, we're always hiring. Come help us build the gateway to Mars. Visit spacex.com/careers. You can see all of our openings.
And this is my first time in Starbase, and Dan, the Star Factory is a manufacturing engineer's dream. To be able to build a factory like this at such a large scale with such a large scale vehicle is so wild to me. And though I'm just visiting, Chris is hanging out right where I call home base. So let's check back in with Chris in Hawthorne.
Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, everything here in Hawthorne's looking good. The crowd is gathered, really excited to watch the hard work of all of their colleagues come to fruition here for Starship on its 9th flight test. Not tracking any issues. We are excited to watch Starship do its thing today, make it halfway around the world, and test a lot of those critical in-space maneuvers and operations that will be vital for the program's continued operation. So Dan and Jesse, we can't wait for liftoff. Let's have a good flight today.
Thanks, Chris. Now, if you're just now joining us, where have you been? But we're glad that you're joining us now. We are at T-minus just under 6 minutes until liftoff of the 9th Starship test flight. So far, the range is looking good. All the airspace and trajectory area that we are going to be launching through is looking good for our test flight today. Weather has been great. It was a little rainy and windy this morning, but it cleared up. It looks beautiful here in Starbase.
3 minuter
And
kvar.
propellant loading continues on
Eller ja, när det är
both
3 minuter
stages.
kvar här så är de
All
klara
right, yeah, it is continuing.
med
We're a
tankningen.
little over 90% full
Precis.
on our booster. We are pretty much full in the main tanks on ship,
So,
filling up those header tanks. We're going to continue loading prop for about 2 more minutes. Once we're done with that, we've got just under 11 million pounds of liquid
De
propellant.
verkar hålla tidsschemat i alla fall här, så att
After we get through all of that prop load, our stage 0 will get ready. The ground systems will go through pushbacks, clearing all of those fluid feed lines back to the propellant farm, getting ready for launch. We did just see they did a flap wiggle check, so the final flap check on the ship. We're doing final alignments of the guidance, navigation, and control system, our thrust vector control, essentially our steering, checkouts of the flight safety system. So everything progressing right now. If we do need to hold, that can come at T-minus 40 seconds. That's a point built into the countdown where we can pause to wait for any final checkouts, pressurizations, anything that we need to complete. We can hold there. We will only hold there if we're tracking an issue. We're not currently tracking anything that will hold us at T-minus 40 seconds. But if you've seen a Starship launch before, they can happen. We can push through them and then launch that day still.
Exactly. But when we do pass through T-minus 40 seconds, a number of events will occur in rapid succession. The ground spin and ignition systems come up to flight pressure, ship goes to internal power, and then after that, the quick disconnect or QD arm lockout is removed in preparation for retraction just shortly after T-minus 0. And once we pass T-minus 40 seconds, we do still have the ability to recycle the count under certain conditions back to T-minus 40 seconds, and then hold there to assess what happened and see if we can proceed again back down to T0.
Yeah. There are a couple of things gates in that timeline that if we pass through that and we hit a hold, we'd have to scrap for the day. One pretty visual one will be if the water starts flowing for that deflector system that's underneath the launch mount. That happens right at around T-minus 10 seconds. The flowing water, we can't turn it off after it starts, and if we hit a hold, we're scrubbed for the day. We need to refill those water tanks. We would also at that point need to refill all of the propellant tanks, as 11 million pounds of propellant. It's a whole lot. We can typically do that in about 24 hours, so we can always turn around to try again tomorrow. But we are coming up on 3 minutes away from liftoff. We should be hearing that we're closed out of prop load on the ship at this point. Booster coming up shortly.
Wow, the weather
ser också att de har haft upp andra toner där ganska sådant. Jag vet inte om det var uppe sist, men det har blivit, det har
2 minutes and 45 seconds from T0 with a lot of objectives for today. The booster, the super heavy booster flying today, will be flying
bland annat fått dit ett nytt en avfyrningsramp kan man säga. Har de fått dit, så att det är snart, det känns som det snart är redo för att
we did just hear we are going to hold at T-minus 40 seconds. So we'll
de kommer
pass
att
along
pausa.
some more information once we hear that reason. But again, that's not the end of the day. We can hold at T-minus 40 seconds for quite a few minutes. We eventually have to start looking at our temperature of all of our propellant. Usually what drives us to, if we've held too long, we have to stand down for the day. So we are expecting a hold at T-minus 40 seconds. Sounds like we're going to be doing some additional checkouts on the booster Raptor while we're at that T-minus 40 second mark. So we will expect to see the clock pause at T-minus 40. And then again, we've got a couple of minutes. They can work through the issues. If we're able to clear them, we can still launch today. If it's something that we can't, we can always stand down, turn around, recycle, fly again tomorrow.
De har inte gjort någon wet address reversal.
Again, that's really important. This is what terminal count is exactly for, is to be checking the vehicle, monitoring the vehicle systems as it makes its way down to T0. And again, this gives us the ability to catch anything and be able to hold, as Dan has been saying, and recycle if we need to, or pause so that we can work through those issues and see if it's something that we need to stand down for. And as Dan mentioned, we will be holding at T-minus 40 seconds, so in about 20 seconds from now.
Yeah, so we'll hold there. And they'll work through these final checkouts on, sounds like just one of those Raptors on the first stage on Super Heavy, which, as you said, we're reflying it for the first time. 29 of those 33 engines have already been used in a launch.
Där har vi paus.
One of which has already launched
twice, and
twice,
we'll go for
and
its
is getting ready for its third
time.
Right. And you just heard our flight director for the day, Joe Sliker. He just shared that we are going to hold at this T-minus 40 second mark. Keep an eye on one of those Raptor engines on booster.
Se om det är vad som händer här. Som sagt, det är andra gången den här boostern flyger, så att det är klart att de måste checka den lite extra. Jag har inte fått något om varför de kollar den.
And if you're just now jumping in, we are holding still at T-minus 40 seconds. Watching one engine, waiting for temperatures to kind of get to a zone that we want them to on one of the engines on the booster, on the Super Heavy booster, getting ready for its second ever flight. We'll just continue to hold. Again, we can hang out here for several minutes. We held for a while on the first attempt last time, and then cleared it, and then we triggered a different issue on the ground side.
But again, this is exactly what it's for. This gives us the best chances at success.
And the clock is rolling.
So
there we go.
All right. T-minus 30. Let's listen in. Watch that first flight proven Super Heavy. Get ready to take off from Starbase.
Härligt, 20 sekunder kvar.
T-minus.
Oh, det blir en stål igen.
Hit hold.
Hold.
We did have a hold, and looks like the clock jumped back to T-minus 40 seconds.
All right, so yep, we jumped out. I did not see the deflector go off.
Nu är de igång igen. Nej.
So hopefully we were right at around that T-minus 10 second mark.
And if we were before that T-minus 10 second mark, we do have the ability to recycle, as we mentioned earlier, back to T-minus 40 seconds.
It looked like this time it was a ground side issue. We're taking a look at this real quick. So again, we're back at T-minus 40. We're gonna hold for a little bit. We are still not scrubbed for the day. Give them a couple of minutes to work through this. Again, we can hang out at T-minus 40 for several minutes. Eventually we start looking at your bulk temperatures and all of your propellant on board the vehicle. We're not actively replenishing the propellant on board Super Heavy and Starship, and so you don't have essentially forever to hang out before things start to warm up, and you do want to make sure your temperature's in a really stable range for a healthy startup on Raptor engines. So they're going to work through this issue. We can continue to hold here for a couple of minutes. What's launch without a little extra added excitement?
Kom igen då. Kom igen då.
All right, so Cumulatively, we've held for a little over 3 minutes between the two holds. Again, this is a ground side issue on our tower. The techs are looking through the data right now to see if it's something that we can either work through or if it would cause us to have to stand down. So we're continuing to hang out with them, holding at T-minus 40.
Spännande. Kom igen då.
If you're just joining us, we did initially hold at T-minus 40 seconds. We continued the count, but recycled before we got to T-minus 10 seconds. And so we're back at a hold at T-minus 40 seconds. Waiting for more information. The team is checking out to see if we can continue today.
Kom igen då. Jag vet inte hur länge de kan stanna på 40 sekunder. Som sagt, bränslet och allting börjar värma upp.
Continuing to hold here at T-minus 40 seconds. We've been holding for just about 5 minutes now as the teams evaluate if we can continue to T0 for flight 9.
Bränslet blir ju varmt och dunstar och det
All right, so
blir
it sounds
dåligt.
like we're coming to a resolution.
Alltså inte skeppet nu som slog ifrån, utan det var ground support, alltså tornet eller någonting liknande.
All right, so we are getting to a resolution. We're going to reset everything.
Säger att de har en lösning. Hoppas på det. Göra en reset.
All right, so we're going to see the clock. It is now
Nu
rolling.
kör de. Vi se
Here we
om det går
go.
bra.
We saw an issue with that quick disconnect to the ship. There is a chance that automation will kick us out again if we encounter the same issue.
Precis.
But for now, the clock is rolling. We'll see
blir
if we
paus.
pass around that T-minus 10-second mark.
Se, det finns fortfarande chans där då, i och med att de har inte problem med quick disconnecten. Ja. Framåt ser det ut som. Ja, det händer något. Bra, gött. Så ja. Det är bra. Det ser ut som alla motorer är igång. Jag tror det är typ 3 motorer eller någonting som de byggt ut på den här boostern. Alla andra har flugit förut.
T-plus 40 seconds, it's one hell of a sight from here. We see it arcing right over top of us. We see 33 out of 33 Raptor engines lit on Super Heavy as it starts to ascend skyward. Coming up on maximum aerodynamic pressure, then only about a minute and a half until we get into hot staging.
Wow, Dan, that was incredible. We could feel the building shaking here, feel the vehicle's power. Now we're just about a minute away from shutting down those engines on the booster. Again, this booster is flying for its second time today.
All right, so hot staging
35.
coming up a little under a minute.
Go. 2 sekunder senare,
We're
hold
going to
staging.
see all but the 3 center engines turn off on the booster. So our version of MECO, most engines cut off. And then just a few seconds later, hoping to see 6 engines ignite on ship to push it away.
Får se ifall den hela boostern exploderar eller inte när den där skjuts iväg. I och med att de har blockerat där. Jag hoppas ju inte det. Men
All right, hot staging, about 30 seconds.
ja, man vet aldrig. Det är ju rätt kraftfullt med Raptorns. Motorerna som skjuter iväg, som startar. Ska vi se.
And definitely keep an eye on which way the booster flips. First ever directional
MECO
flip we're going for
alltså
today
om
should
10
flip
sekunder.
straight up.
02.35 och sen har vi hot staging 2 sekunder senare.
See those engines powering down?
Där, och den.
Booster engine cut off.
Där, och så hot staging. Där.
Ship ignition. Stage separation.
Incredible flip by Super Heavy Booster, and you can see those 6 engines, those
Alla
3
motorer
engines
igång.
on the ship
Snyggt.
ignited.
Boostern också.
6 healthy Raptors running on
Ska vi
ship
se hur
on
det här
its way
går.
to space. Peek that engine view. Booster doing the boost back.
Det ser fortfarande ut som
Chris,
det
how's
brinner
it
där.
looking over there in Hawthorne, man?
It is looking
Raptor chamber pressure is nominal.
It is looking absolutely incredible here in Hawthorne. As we said, 6 healthy engines on ship. We've got 13 out of 13 engines on the booster. Now down to those 3, which is what we expect in the final moments of the boost back burn. Now, as a reminder, we are not recovering the super heavy booster today. We are instead going to do
Booster
some...
boost back, shut down.
And there we had a good shutdown of the boost back burn. Next up will be the jettison of that hot stage
Ship
ring.
avionics, power and telemetry nominal.
Great call out there that everything looking nominal aboard the super heavy vehicle, which is returning to Earth, and we're going to be doing some experiments with it, including a higher angle of attack re-entry, as well as some engine tests as it gets closer to the Gulf. We are, again, because of these tests not recovering it, we are sending it to the Gulf on purpose to do those tests. But again, you see the booster on the left-hand side of your screen. You see ship with 6 healthy engines continuing its ascent to its planned suborbital trajectory. Everything going very well so far for Starship's 9th flight. Now 4 minutes, 15 seconds in. Great views from inside of the aft engine area of ship there, looking at those 3 sea level and 3 Raptor engines on the right-hand side of your screen. The booster doing its LOX dump, that liquid oxygen dump. So because we don't need some of that liquid oxygen propellant in its tanks, we vent that propellant out to lessen the booster's mass as it comes in for its landing. Just absolutely gorgeous views watching these 2 vehicles do their respective things in the skies over Texas here today. And Dan, we're approaching the 5-minute mark into the flight. Super Heavy is descending rapidly. What can we expect here in the next few minutes as it does its atmospheric tests?
Yeah, now as we had talked about, Super Heavy might not have a very smooth ride down. We're going to be putting it through this higher angle of attack. So we're kind of pitching it up a tiny bit, increasing drag. We've done this in wind tunnels. We've done this in computer modeling. It shows that sometimes the control isn't great, but only one way to really prove it out, and that's to get real-world data. So here comes Super Heavy. It should be igniting for its landing burn in just about 40 seconds from now.
06:19.
And we are going to relight 13 engines, then bring that down to 3 engines. As we talked about earlier, we will be intentionally shutting down. We will be shutting down one of those 3 center engines intentionally to push the limits of the Super Heavy booster.
Ship Raptor chamber pressure is nominal.
Det brukar inte vara problem med booster.
And continuing to see 6 healthy engines on the ship. 3 sea level and 3 vacuum engines still ignited as the Super Heavy booster is making its way back down to Earth.
We can see those grid fins doing some heavy work.
Booster landing, start up.
Ignited for our landing burn. It may have ended with that landing burn. Does look like we lost telemetry from the booster once we started into that landing burn. Did you hear confirmation that the booster did demise? So the booster's flight ending before it was able to get through landing burn, but again, we were not bringing that back. We were expecting it to make a hard splashdown in the Gulf. We were getting live data back the entire time through that high angle of attack flight, so that was something that was really vital for us to get during this reuse. First free flight of booster in the books. All right, ship has about 2 minutes left.
Yeah, in about 2 minutes, we expect all 6 Raptor engines to shut down. That will be SECO, basically second engine or second stage engine shut off. And these are some incredible views, Dan, from the aft end of the ship, watching as the engines stay ignited with the Earth in the background.
As always, the Starship avionics team, the techs. I think we just heard the booster. But, all right, we got about a minute left into this burn. All eyes definitely on ship as we get through the final stages into its ascent. We're expecting it to start to cut those engines off in about 45 seconds.
Syns ju redan.
Terminal guidance.
Jag har lite rött på den där ena motorn, men det kanske är okej. Det har varit så tidigare.
All right, just about 30 seconds to go. We're in terminal guidance.
Se om den klarar det här.
In the final stages of this ascent burn. We did see shutdown of the Raptor engines.
Snyggt.
We do stagger these, so we do the Raptors first. Those 3 have shut down successfully. Sea levels still running.
Där börjar det bli snart här.
Ship engine cut off.
Där stängdes de av. Oj. Brann det lite. Ja. Bra. Jag har kommit längre än sist.
Ship engine cut off, the 3 most beautiful words in the English language.
And great call out that we had nominal insertion. An incredible flight test so far today. We reflew a super heavy booster for the very first time in 9 test flights. Ship is in its orbital trajectory. Again, it's going to remain suborbital for its mission today. But it ignited all 6 of its engines and made it all the way through SECO just now.
What a moment.
Incredible.
All right, but I mean, that's still lots to come for the rest of this flight. Per usual, I need to collect myself. Hey, Chris, how's it going over there in Hawthorne, man? How's everybody doing?
I think the elation and the excitement and the happiness at what we just saw achieved carried through across all of our sites. What an incredible view to see Starship back orbiting the Earth just under 11 minutes into our mission. Absolutely exciting to see all of this, and super pumped especially to see all of the team's hard work in action here today. As guaranteed, it has been an exciting evening so far for Starship's 9th test flight. We lifted off a little bit after 6:30 p.m. after a couple of holds that were triggered at the T-minus 40-second mark, but we were able to clear those, one on the Raptor, one on the tower, and we were able to lift off successfully from Starbase. 33 out of 33 Raptor engines lit on the Super Heavy, all 6 engines lit on ship, bringing it to its planned suborbital trajectory around Earth. But as Dan said, we've got a lot still coming up in our flight sequence. So coming up at about T+18 minutes, 26 seconds, we'll have the first deployment of simulated Starlink satellites planned from Starship. That will be followed at about T plus 37 minutes and 49 seconds by the relight of a single Raptor sea level engine in space. This is going to help us gather data on our ability to do a deorbit burn for future Starship missions that will go orbital. And then, of course, one of the biggest tests yet to come is the new heat shield modifications to Starship. And that'll start with re-entry into Earth's atmosphere at about the T plus 45 minute mark, which should take about 16, 18 minutes to complete. And now today's reentry is going to test that heat shield like we said, specifically how Starship will hold up to 100 missing heat shield tiles on its thermal protection system. Now, we purposely took those 100 tiles off over very critical areas of the vehicle to be able to safely test on a flight like this suborbital trajectory into the Indian Ocean what might happen on an operational flight in those areas if we were to lose the primary heat shield tile over Starship. So very critical test coming up. And then after that, we'll have the final descent where we will again be pushing Starship to its limits. We definitely pushed the booster to its limits today to gather data, and we're going to be doing the exact same thing on that ship, seeing how the ship handles various flight conditions that we will need it to fly in as we look to one day soon bring ships back to Starbase for catch and reuse. Now, while there are payload simulators on Starship for deployment today, as we will see in a few minutes, the primary data and the primary payload for today is the data. And today, just like with Starship's previous test flights, that data is coming to us courtesy of our Starlink network. In fact, it is from Starlink that you are seeing these wonderful views of ship in space right now. So, and I can't wait to see Starlink really provide those epic views and that data transmission during reentry, which is very, very critical to getting that data during reentry. So, Dan and Jesse, it's been an exciting day so far. There's more to come. As we get ready for Starship's first ever payload deploy, what can we expect next here in the next few minutes?
Thanks, Chris. Just going to reiterate, thank you to the Starlink team for these incredible views today. In a few minutes, Starship will deploy 8 Starlink simulators, similar in size to our next generation Starlink satellites. The Starlink simulators will be on the same suborbital trajectory as Starship, meaning they will passively re-enter the atmosphere, just like Starship. With tests like these, we can see how Starship's payload deploy systems work in flight while ensuring that the simulator satellites pose no safety risk to people on Earth or for other satellites in orbit. Now, this also ensures that any parts of these simulator Starlink satellites that do survive re-entry splash down harmlessly in the middle of the Indian Ocean.
And then before we get there, though, we're going to have to open up that payload deploy door. So we've only ever done that one time before. Pretty sure it was Flight 3. Someone on the internet, please check me. But that was the only time we ever opened it. And we've had Starlink simulators on the last 2 flights, but we haven't gotten to this moment yet where we're able to open up the payload door and start deploying these. It's going to be pretty cool. We've got them stacked inside of the Starship payload bay, and we'll have potentially a couple of views. You saw one camera pop up. Oh, there we go. Look inside of the payload bay of Starship. You can see them stacked down in the middle of your view. There's kind of 4 on either side, so they're sandwiched on top of each other, a stack of 4 right behind each other. And then we're going to pop the door open. It's on the right side of your screen, so we'll see that open up and then start firing those Starlink simulators out into space.
We are expecting the payload door to open in a little over a minute from now. And then once that payload door is open, about a couple minutes later is when we will start dispensing those Starlink simulators. What a great
right
view.
At the bottom of the stack. So should be able to see them kind of firing out from right there. So really cool. And eventually these are going to carry dozens of the next generation of Starlink satellite into space, and those are going to enable some truly insane things in terms of speeds from space and what we're able to do. Starlink's been really great for Starship, obviously. Getting live video back is really cool, but just the amount of high-speed telemetry, everything we're able to get back is insane. And for a development program, that's kind of everything. We're in excess of 130 or 160. My numbers are fuzzy right now, just like my brain is, but well in excess of 100 megabits per second of downlink, and a lot of that gets eaten up by video. We've got dozens of cameras across Starship. We added several more. For this flight, you saw a couple of those as we have essentially 360 degrees. Oh. Open the pod bay door, Hal.
Det börjar bli bara säga så går det ut om de öppnar dörren.
Now we are expecting the payload door to open any moment now, so we're watching out for that. Again, you're looking at the inside of Starship as it's suborbital.
Borde inte vara så mycket grejer där inne.
Well, we heard the door open was in progress. It was unable to actuate all the way open, so they are going to close it back up. Hal told me no. He said, I'm sorry, Dan. Can't do that. Looks like we won't get the door open today.
Oh.
But that's okay. This is obviously a test we want to be able to do before we're deploying full-on Starlinks. But the real focus for this, now that we are in space, is getting to that reentry. That is the most critical phase of Starship that we still have to prove out.
Jag kunde absolut inte få upp dörren. Det gick inte.
All right, well, so it does look like we're not going to be able to deploy Starlinks today, but we should have pretty frequent views from Starship. They might cut in and out every once in a while, but should be pretty regular. We are in darkness right now, so might be a lot of black, but the cool part is when we get to reentry, it's going to be daytime.
Yes, and we did that on purpose so that we can get some live daytime views as ship is returning back to Earth.
All right, so we are going to take a break. Enjoy these views as we get them. Enjoy the tunes. We'll be back in a couple of minutes when we get ready to relight one of those Raptor engines on orbit. See you soon.
Och relight ska ju ske alltså 37. Kommer det göra då. Ja, det verkar gå. Det går ju bättre än vad det gjort tidigare i alla fall. Så att vi hoppas väl på att de kan göra en återuppstart av en av de här motorerna då. Och vi hoppas på att de kör en re-entry som går hela vägen och att vi landar. Ja. Spännande. Boostern verkar ju ha gått sönder. Det var ju inte helt oväntat. Då har de lyckats lista ut vad som är begränsningarna för den. Ja. Helt klart spännande. Det ser ut som att de har fått ordning på skeppet också. Så att det åker som det är tänkt att det ska göra. Kommer en bra bit och det är fortfarande helt, så det är ju positivt. Ja, alla motorer på boostern tändes ju också. Det var snyggt. Får se om nästa booster. De har ju börjat en ny booster där också. Det är inte den som kommer härnäst, tror jag. Men de har påbörjat den nya versionen av boostern där. Så att det ska bli intressant att se när den kommer ut. Hoppas att de får bättre lycka med den än vad de fick med skeppets version 2. I och med att det exploderade 2 gånger efter varann. Sen såg det helt klart bättre ut. Ja. Vad ska man säga? Har inte någon tittare vad jag kan se. Tyvärr. Om det finns någon tittare så kan ni gärna, om ni har några frågor eller funderingar på, kan ni skriva in dem. Se här om vi kan kika lite på annan vinkel kanske. Ska vi se. Vi kan få lite andra vinklar kanske. Sitter där, får vi se. Det här är från NASA Spaceflight. Kika lite på den. Ser, kan få med deras kommentarer här bara.
You can see 33 healthy Raptor engines as Flight 9 takes off and is on its way uphill. A beautiful launch, guys. Absolutely amazing audio. As we are through max Q and approaching stage separation, keep your eye on it. You'll see the stage separation through the amazing tracking. Is this DOS? I'm assuming this is DOS with his amazing tracking rig.
Based on the angle, I think it's either DOS or Gauge. I'm not sure. I would be willing to wager DOS. But you're right, Gene. 33 healthy Raptor engines. That's so important to point out, as so many of these are being reused. And that's the first thing I noticed on liftoff. They look good. I see a bright circle there with no dim spots.
What
But
you're going
the
to see
big
now
tickets
is
items are coming. The big
They're coming
ticket
up.
items are
You might-
still coming.
You might notice the rocket is in a different attitude now. It has rolled for the hot staging and the directional flip.
Here we go.
there's
Watch out for
most
that.
engines cut off.
There we go.
SpaceX stream a little delayed. It's fine.
Yep.
There it
There's
is.
Nico.
Wow, you could even see them throttled down before Miko. That was cool.
There's
Hot
stage
staging.
sep.
There's the flip!
Oh, that
Look at
goes
that!
up. There goes up. It goes up.
It is going up!
That's beautiful.
And goodbye, booster.
Also,
Booster
like we got
6 healthy
six.
engines on. Yep.
Yeah, I was gonna
13
say,
for the
look
boost
at-
back as well.
13 healthy engines for
Vi ser
boost
ifall
back.
de fick
Guys, this-
någon bättre vy på... Det ser inte ut som de hade någon bättre vy på boostern när de kom tillbaka. Det var ju synd. Tänkte ifall de skulle kanske eventuellt ha det. Hade varit kul att se. Ja. Se om vi har någon mer som följer dem här. Se om jag hittar någonting här. Det är ganska många som följer detta, så att där har vi en till. Vi ser. Verkar vara dimmigt där. Därför var det dålig bild. Man såg ju tydligt hur varmt det blev i alla fall när den var på väg in i återinträde. Så pass långt var det. Det verkar ju som att den överlevde till att motorerna startar upp. I alla fall. Nu ser jag inkommande. Så det är väldigt molnigt, väldigt dimmigt där, så det blir ju typ ingenting. Har den här. Everyday astronaut. Syns där har jag den. Där. Se. Ja, jag har lite bättre bild där. Se vad som händer här. Många fåglar. Oj. Han det där. Ser så att varmt det blev där på den. Tappade han bilden helt han. Där hände det något. Oj, oj, oj. Ja, den exploderade jag. Kändes tydligt där. Kollar igen där. Där. Puff. Pang. Ja. Då såg vi hur vi gick för den också. Ja. Det var ju inte jätteväntat. Vi har en till en bild där. Ska vi se. Ja, fixeringen här. Där. Ja, samma som vi såg förut. Ja, men den verkar ha gått upp i rökten. Tyvärr. Men sagt, det var inte jätteoväntat. Det skulle ske. Så det verkar som Starship har börjat och göra något konstigt också. Osäker på vad han gör.
All right, if you're just tuning in, we are about 30 minutes into today's flight test. And the ship is on its suborbital trajectory. As you can see in some of the views and from some of the telemetry, we are in a little bit of a spin. We did spring a leak in some of the fuel tank systems inside of Starship, which a lot of those are used for your attitude control. And so at this point, we've essentially lost our attitude control with Starship. We are still on a path toward re-entry. We are suborbital, so no matter what, we are going to enter. However, this lowers the chances for it to be a controlled re-entry. So if you think back to Flight 3, when we had something similar happen, just the end symptom of a loss of attitude control, we were in a roll by the time we hit re-entry. So we are going to re-enter. We should hopefully still have views. The Starlink satellites are pretty
Sa ju det att det var någonting som inte kändes rätt.
We've got 4 of those terminals on the vehicle, and they're pretty robust to maintaining contact even when we are in a spin, essentially. So we should hopefully continue to keep live views. It's going to still be dark until we get a little bit closer to entry, as we are...
Jag vet inte riktigt vad han gör för någonting.
We're coming up on Africa. I believe we do swing just to the south of that continent. And by the time we start heading out over the Indian Ocean, we'll start heading into a sunrise. So,
det ser ut som att de är i molnen redan.
We were hoping to do the PES deploy and relight an engine, and then really importantly get into that controlled entry to really put the heat shield through the ringer. Nonetheless, Starship marching forward towards that re-entry over the Indian Ocean, so we'll continue to hang with it and give you any updates as things continue to change.
Mm. Vet inte riktigt vad han håller på med. Ja, som sagt, det såg ut som att det höll på med något sånt där förut. Så att, det känns lite nära marken tycker jag också. Det syns inte riktigt hur mycket den roterar. Eller så. Fort går det i alla fall. Jag vet inte riktigt vad de... Det verkar inte som att de ska tända en motor igen heller då. Oj, det hände någonting.
All right, so 36 minutes, 15 seconds into today's flight tests. You're seeing some flat movement here on the ship. If you've been following along, we have essentially lost attitude control on the ship at this point. it is suborbital, so it's still headed to the exact same trajectory as before. We were not able to get that payload door open and deploy those nose cones. We've been dealing with some leaks on the ship. This is also what led to that loss of attitude control. So at this point, we are kind of in a spin, and we are also going to be skipping that Raptor relight. If you've followed through the history of Starship, something similar happened, different cause, but same symptom back on Flight 3, where we weren't able to maintain attitude control in orbit. And so we're going to skip the relight of that Raptor engine while we're in space. We are going to still proceed with entry, but as we are not able to control the attitude of the ship, as we get into entry, it will enter in whatever orientation it is in at the time, which does not bode well for the ship's heat shield, as we're not going to be essentially aligned the way that we want to do for reentry. So it is definitely coming down. It is definitely heading to the Indian Ocean, but our chances of making it all the way down are pretty slim. So we'll still get as much data as we can. We're still getting live telemetry, live views from Starlink the entire time, and we'll continue to stick with the ship as it continues on. We are about 10
så fort den börjar och få drag, så borde de kunna få lite styr på den, kan jag tycka. Men det är inte alltid det blir så.
Start to bring the Starship back through the Earth's atmosphere. So that coming up in about 10 minutes or so. So we'll check back in with everybody in a little bit.
Kanske något de bör kika på, om det går att göra det så att den vänder på sig själv. Om man fäller upp flapsen på ena sidan så borde den ju göra någonting när den får lite drag. Ungefär 7 minuter kvar tills vi ska börja återinträda. Så hur det går. Det är rätt intressant att de får massa sådana här liknande problem hela tiden på det här. Men nu är det ju så att det här är det mest, ja, det behöver inte vara det mest, men det är ganska komplicerat det här. Eftersom de nu har löst alltså problemen de hade att explodera, det är ju det är bra att de har löst det. Så att nu får de ju se att det finns andra problem med skeppet och då kan de lösa det nästa gång också. Jag tror att de är hyfsat färdiga med nästa skepp. Tror jag. Det kanske inte alls dröjer så länge innan det är dags för nästa testflygning. Då kanske de kan åtgärda de här problemen som de stöter på här. Man tycker nästan att de borde kunna ha något backup-system på de här. Som att de har 2 system. De kan stänga av ett och köra på det andra stället. Eller liknande. För mig att de sa att de skulle börja köra hot thrusters igen, men en läcka är ju svårt att göra någonting åt ifall det är så att den läcker och orsakar att den spinner. Det går ju inte kanske att stänga av om man inte typ fixar någon form av avstängning till själva den gasen som läcker ut då. Det ser ut som att det läcker någonting här kring. Fast det där är väl, jag vet inte Jo, det måste vara bak till det där. Oj, nu börjar det hända saker. Jag tänker här är ju en sån här... Om när de ska fånga skeppet så är det här. Men nu börjar det hända saker. Jag skulle förvåna mig ifall vi tappar kontakten snart här. Så det börjar att återinträda här. Typ. Plasma ser vi i alla fall. Oj. Värsta lasershowen.
All right, so we are 42 minutes and change into today's flight test. You're seeing the light show start as Starship is getting closer to its reentry. If you're just tuning in, we were able to successfully make it to orbit, run into a couple of issues as we've coasted to our entry point over the Indian Ocean. At this point, we had lost attitude control of the ship and entered into a spin. The team made the call to do what's called passivate the vehicle, so we're essentially venting all of the remaining propellant overboard, and it's going to make an uncontrolled reentry. Important to note, this is a contingency that is planned for, and we clear the zones in the Indian Ocean where these entries could take place. So we're not going to come down exactly where we would have had nothing happened, but we do clear a tremendous amount of space out in the Indian Ocean in the event that we run into this. We understand that there are always risks essentially with these flight tests with the hardware, but we don't really accept any compromise when it comes to protecting people.
And it is one thing to note is we will actually still re-enter in our planned airspace zone, which is good. That is exactly what we planned for. You know, we do plan for if something does go a little bit off nominal, that we have enough airspace cleared out for situations just like this.
Yeah, re-entry is still just that really critical phase that we need to try and gather as much data, as much information as possible. Is a fully reusable heat shield has never been flown before, history of space flight, and that's something that Starship still has to crack. And so we had a whole range of experiments on this one at this point, and we just started to lose some of our cameras, so it's very possible that we'll start to lose contact with Starship a lot sooner than we would have if it was a nominal reentry. So we are expecting it to break up essentially on its reentry over the Indian Ocean. So not able to do a lot of our on-orbit objectives today, but just the fact that we, got it into space was just a really big moment for a lot of the team.
Yeah, and another thing to note is that Super Heavy did fly for its second flight today. It first flew on flight 7, and it made it all the way to our shutdown of all the engines and stage separation, getting ship into its suborbital trajectory today. It did ignite its 13 engines, but it did demise at that point. We did plan to fly it back down to Earth at a higher angle of attack, and we do expect it to stress the vehicle a lot more than what we've seen previously. So it's not unexpected that we did lose the booster before we got to the actual landing.
Yeah. So we're gonna continue to hang out and see if we get any updates on ship. It does look like we might be getting some video back soon. There we go.
Okay.
So this is a view essentially on the top part of Starship. You're looking up at the payload bay and towards the nose cone. So views are going to be a little bit scarce potentially as, again, we are in essentially a tumble. We had lost that attitude control. So Starlink, when it's able to connect, able to feed this down. We are at the phase where we would expect entry to start within the next minute or so. So we are entering uncontrolled, but again, we're entering into an airspace and a sea space that is cleared and monitored in advance of launch and before we get to this phase.
And with the views that we are able to see, you are seeing a lot of that plasma build up during reentry. We do expect the vehicle to see about 1400 degrees Celsius. You can see the flap feeling that temperature there, a little bit melting away. But as we expected with the spinning of the vehicle, we are no longer controlling the attitude of the vehicle. So this is now, at this point in the test flight, it is expected to see it begin to demise a little bit on its way back down to Earth.
Yeah, and so we'll stick with it for as long as we're kind of getting any reach back from the ship as it starts to make this re-entry. But yeah, so it's re-entering actively right now. And again, we did do what's called passivation. So you essentially vent all of your excess propellant overboard before you hit the atmosphere. That's a safety measure we can take on the ship while you still have contact with it. So that was done. It's now coming down in the predetermined hazard area that was cleared ahead of flight. Not controlled, so we're not going to get all of that reentry data that we're still really looking forward to. This is kind of a new generation of ship. It has different flaps, improved heat shield, a whole lot of things that we're really trying to really put through the ringer, as there's a whole lot we still need to learn before we get to kind of the next step that we're hoping for, which is going to be that ship going orbital and eventually coming back here for a catch. So getting through one of these fully is going to be really important. It's not going to be today, but we are just going to stick with the ship, see what else we can learn as it makes its way through the atmosphere and brings an end to the 9th flight test. So we'll stick with it.
Ja, det ser ut som att det håller på att slitas isär, det här skeppet. Så att det är nog klart när som helst här nu. Avvakta lite grann, ja. Så kommer in, flika in med saker ifall jag har någonting nytt att säga.
If you're just now joining us, we did have an on-time liftoff from Starbase Texas at 6:30 p.m. Central Time of the Flight 9 vehicle. We did have some incredibly stressing objectives today. The Super Heavy booster flew for its second flight. It first flew on Flight 9 and made its way to take ship all the way up to stage separation, doing its second flight ever, which is pretty incredible. We did lose the booster on the way back down as we did fly it back down at a higher angle of attack. So as expected, we did have it demise on the way back down.
Yeah, we were able to get all the way to that landing burn though. So we made it through that higher angle of attack. So a lot of great data that's going to help us improve those future booster flights.
Yeah, we did do the directional flip and it worked.
Yep.
It was actually
Flipped
a great
right
view
direction.
that we saw. And then ship continued 6 healthy Raptor engines in the beginning of its flight, making it all the way to Seco and coasting for quite a while. We made it to the expected time that we would open up the payload door. Unfortunately, the door did not open as we expected it to, so we did not deploy the 8 Starlink satellites.
Yeah, we ran into a couple of issues once ship got there, but I can tell you it was a pretty crazy moment for a lot of the people that were standing here for ship to make it there. It's been a couple of flights, but it was really exciting to see. Ran into some issues on orbit. We weren't able to deploy the Starlinks. We eventually lost attitude control, dealing with some propellant links inside of the ship. And we did lose attitude control. And just to confirm, we did lose contact with the ship officially a couple of minutes ago. So that brings an end to the 9th flight test. So still a lot of work to do, but really big moment. Chris,
Yes.
how's everybody doing over there in Hawthorne?
Då har vi då tappat kontakt med skeppet då. Så att det är ju borta.
It's a test program, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to learn, and that was definitely the vibe and the atmosphere here at Hawthorne. Would have been great to see Ship get all the way through its objectives today, but with all of that data that came down through the Starlink system, we're definitely going to learn, and we're definitely going to fix that and push forward. Also, great to see the responsible engineers here in Mission Control talking with the flight control teams in Starbase. We talked about how it's great having that expert knowledge on console to be able to go to at a moment's notice, and that really helped us make the right decisions in orbit today when we decided to passivate the vehicle. So we will be here looking forward to Flight 10 and some success on future flights.
All right, well, obviously congratulations to everybody that poured so much time, effort into getting this ship, this rocket off the pad. The last 2 months have been an absolute gauntlet for a lot of people, and we're continuing to learn more about this ship, about this rocket. We are trying to do something that is impossibly hard, and it's not always you're not going to reach it in a straight line. We said there's going to be bumps, there's going to be turns, but seeing that ship in space today was a hell of a moment for us. So congratulations to every single person who put time, effort, sweat, anything into that rocket.
Yeah, this is exactly the SpaceX way. We're going to learn, iterate, and iterate over and over again until we figure it out. So thank you to everybody for tuning in. Thank you for the fine people of Cameron County, including the residents of the newest city of Starbase, as well as the Coast Guard, Federal Aviation Administration, Government of Mexico, as well as the Australian Space Agency.
All right, now this is not the end. We're going to have a whole bunch of cool liftoff stuff, so be sure to follow us on X at SpaceX for more, and we will see you back here for Flight 10. Thanks for tuning in.
Ja, och där var vi då klara med den här testflygningen. Det som vi klarade av egentligen, och det var ju det som de klarade av egentligen, det var ju att återanvända en booster. De hade högre attackvinkel på den, så att varför den gick sönder, det får vi säkert reda på så småningom. Men det var i alla fall det, och vi fick iväg skeppet till rymden, och den klarade sig nästan genom hela vägen där. Så jag avslutar strömmen här. Tack alla som tittade. Vi kommer såklart få tillbaka igen när det är dags för nästa flygning. Glöm inte att klicka i den här subscribe-knappen så att ni får, och så notisknappen så att ni får uppdateringar om när det kommer nya videos. Så får ni ha en bra kväll, en fortsatt bra natt.